And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans. I'm your on-air host, Sara DiVello, and I'm so excited to welcome you today to this special pre-Valentine's Day Mystery Monday. Louise Hare joining us live from London to give us the inside scoop on Miss Aldridge Regrets. Louise, welcome to Mystery and Thriller Mavens. Tell us about Miss Aldridge.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
So Miss Aldridge Regrets is, I guess you call it a golden age murder mystery. So set in 1936, and Lena Aldridge, so Miss Aldridge, is a jazz singer. And at the beginning of the story, she's a jazz singer who had really high hopes for a glittering career that hasn't really worked out for her. But she's been offered this incredible opportunity that seems too good to be true, to travel first class on the Queen Mary to New York, and she's going to star on Broadway. So sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But then the murders start to happen.
But then the murders start to happen. Yes, so glamorous, sailing on the Queen Mary, headed for a glittering career on Broadway. But sadly, because this is a mystery, things do not go as expected. But just like that, Louise Hare hooked us good. And we're going to talk all things Miss Aldridge. So welcome, everybody. We are broadcasting live to 6 different destinations across Facebook and YouTube. No matter where you are watching from, you're in the right place. This is the right time. It is Mystery Monday. And because Mondays can be murder, we're going to make them a little less painful for you. If you've been here before, you know the drill. And if you're new, welcome. We're so happy to have you. Here's the drill. Every Monday, I give you my hand-picked featured authors, and you get to ask them anything. So ask Louise about her research process of the Queen Mary, of her lead character, Lena, her time on stage, her own singing. How much is Lena is Louise? We got a lot of questions going. And also, how hard is it to write a book that takes place in 1936? Because so much has changed. We got a lot of things to talk about. While your little fingers are flying, typing your questions, I want to kick off with some of your amazing praise. So, Louise, when this was, I'm going to pop this up. Miss Aldridge was named a most anticipated book of the year. I'm going to pop this up so we can all look at it today, by Betches, which is one of my favorite accounts, Essence Magazine, Crime Reads, and many more. And your book earned some incredible praise. Let's take a peek at that as well. So let's look first at Emily Henry, who is, of course, the #1 bestselling author of the book, most recently Book Lovers. I'm going to pop this up as well. And she describes the book as, oops, let me pop it so we can all see, super cinematic. Every bit as Agatha Christie-esque as it sounds. If you like murder mysteries, who doesn't? Pick this one up. So let's start there. First of all, incredibly high praise. Your fellow Brit, Agatha Christie, the queen of mysteries herself. But let's talk about this super cinematic part. So you shared that you wrote this. I mean, you must have been writing during lockdown. So how were you writing these super cinematic scenes?
I guess because the way I write is I try and imagine a scene and then I kind of describe it. But as well, one of the influences for this book, I mean, I love reading Agatha Christie, but I also love the Poirot TV adaptations, in particular the ones starring David Suchet. And so I really was trying to, I guess, create that sort of aesthetic, that sort of vibe of, the glamour and, the fashion and, what people were looking like, as well as just telling the good story. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I love historical, and I love the glamour and the fashion and all of it. So let's talk about your research process into the fashion alone, because the shoes were so different. The underwear were so different. Everything. Did they have elastic? Did they have zippers? Did they, hook and eye, buttons, corsets? Who knows? So how did you, where do you even start, and how long did it take you, and how did you dig all that information up?
Yeah, the fashion was something that, I could have just got lost in that for months. There was just so much to look at. There's so much online, but I also went to the library and got lots of books out and looked at, who were the big designers of that time, because Lena's traveling in first class. So people would have gone to, high-end stores and had these incredible gowns, because you would always have to wear something different for dinner. You couldn't wear the same thing twice.
Right. I didn't
Yeah.
even think of that.
Yeah, and lots of backless gowns. And I was like, how? Like, how? What was the
Yeah,
end of
how?
So, like, just trying to sort of imagine, my character within these sort of costumes, and Googling, like you said, things like zippers, like what existed
Yeah.
in terms of how you fasten things, and the shoes, and just, I mean, it's not wildly long ago. It's, less than 100 years, but I mean, technology in fashion changes everything.
Right, exactly. So, who were the big fashion designers of 1936? Who did, what did you discover?
Yeah, I was really happy I got to include a Schiaparelli gown in one of Lena's scenes that her friend lends to her. Um, but yeah, I didn't name check a lot of designers, because I didn't want to, because Lena's actually not well off. Like, she sort of borrowed some clothes. So I sort of name checked a couple and then described some others, and talked a bit about the jewelry and things like that. But yeah, I mean, Lena herself, because I was obviously writing in first person as well, she doesn't actually know a lot about what she has, because she didn't buy it. And she's sort of, I mean, part of the story is that she's out of her depth a little bit, because she's in this scenario. I mean, there's murders happening, but also she, basically a working class girl trying to integrate with these really rich people who live a completely different life. And obviously she's passing as white, and she's mixed race. So there's all these different things that are sort of going on with her. And she enjoys wearing, the fancy gowns, but she's also, a little bit concerned, like, am I wearing this right? Is everyone else like, am I going to give myself away with this dress? I think it looks nice, but is this of the right level compared to everyone else? Like, she doesn't know any of these things.
Exactly. And I think in addition to me just loving historical, that was a big part of the book that I identified with, because I'm from a working class background and I often feel out of my depth. And so I think that feeling is probably something that so many of us can identify when you're in a room or a situation that is new to you, and you're trying to watch what you say or how you present yourself or what you reference, and that was very familiar to me, even though obviously Lena and I are very different in many ways. So I really loved that part of passing, and it's not just passing as white, but passing as more cultured or moneyed or landed gentry or whatever the term would be. She's passing a lot of ways. I also liked how you said she's out of her depth. A little boat pun, a ship pun there, Louise.
Well, who doesn't love a pun?
I see what you did there, and I liked it. Louise, let's talk about some of the other parts of this book. So you actually open with, and then I want to get into some of the other praise. You actually open with another first person account that is not Lena, that is in fact the murderer, which is so interesting, because you don't know, until you get to the next chapter, are we going to be in the murderer's eyes the whole time, or, what's going on? And we see Lena. So we first see Lena not through our own eyes, but through the killer's. Did you always envision opening with the killer? What was your choice, your creative choice behind that? Were you like, yes, I want to get in that killer's eye, mind? Walk us in through that creative choice.
Yeah, it was something I added, I think in the second draft, because there's quite a lot going on. I mean, because I have like 2 timelines as well. So
yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot.
My brain hurts.
And what I ended up doing was I wrote most of the ship timeline in one go, and then I wrote, because the other timeline is like I think like 10 days or 2 weeks earlier, and then I sort of wrote that in one go, and then I sort of slotted it in. And then I realized there's actually you have to wait for quite a while for the first murder, because even though it's already happened, the next one is further on. So then I was thinking, well, actually, if I had a prologue, but then how do you make a prologue interesting? So then I was like, oh, what if it was the murderer?
I had myself muted in case my dog barked. So what was the first chapter before you decided in the second draft to create this epilogue, this jump in time epilogue from the killer's point of view? What was your original vision? Was it Lena?
Yeah. So what is now the first proper chapter with Lena on the ship? That was
where she's looking down at the water.
Yeah. So that was literally the first chapter. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. But then you in your second draft were like, what if? And then that's when you went back. And so then you wrote all of the ship scenes. Then you went back and wow. Okay. And when I said my brain hurts, I meant as a writer to try to keep all of that organized, because as a reader, it feels very seamless. Like it doesn't seem like a lot at all. It just seems like, oh, of course well, now I need to know this. Well, now I want to know that. Well, take me. I'm here to go where you take me. But when I think about trying to create that and weave that tangled web, I'm like, that must have taken some time. How long did it take you?
I think the first draft took about 8 or 9 months, including sort of researching and yeah, and sort of, well, I always have like a sort of, I call it a 0.5 draft, which is where everything's in the right place. And then before I show anyone, I kind of fix a few things and then go, does this work? Go and have a look and tell me.
Oh my gosh, I love it. A 0.5?
Yeah, nobody needs to see the 0.5 because that's when everything's wrong.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I might just give myself, I hope I wrote this right, a 0.5. Is that how you would spell it, Louise?
I have no idea.
Okay, good. As long as I didn't get it wrong. Louise, let's jump into so I let people submit questions in advance if they can't make so that they can watch the replay when they're not at work. So let's jump into some of the questions that were submitted in advance. So first up from Leica, she said she would like to know, how did publishing your first book change your process of writing your next book, if it did change it at all?
Oh, that's a good one. I guess, I mean, it's still hard.
Yeah.
It never seems to get easier. I think you save time on a few things because like I know not to spend like 3 months researching before I start writing, for example. So because I end up with loads of notes and then most of it doesn't end up in the book. So what I try and do is say, okay, you can have 3 or 4 weeks of researching. And then then the rest of the research I do is I go along when I know what I want to include, because also I'm not very good at plotting in advance. And even if I do, I change a lot of things as I go. So I don't always know what research I need. So for Miss Aldridge, I knew that I needed to research the ship because obviously that's one of my main settings. I knew I needed to research Soho in London because that's my other main setting. The fashion was important. So I started there. And then other things sort of came up along the way, like looking at the political situation in 1936. I was like, oh, it's not going to be a big part, but I want to comment on it a little bit and see what was happening. Right. So things like that come up later, but I had to have started writing before I know that needs to be done. So yeah.
Right. Because of right. Oh my gosh. Right. Because that is going to be impacting. Okay. Yes, I'm seeing that. So you only thought of that once you get it. So you're not a plotter, you're a pantser.
Yeah, definitely.
So you don't know the ending.
Well, no. Well, I actually changed the murderer in the second draft. So no, I don't know. I didn't know the ending.
Without giving anything away, because people really don't like spoilers on here. Yeah. Why did you change the murderer? Did they reveal themselves to you? Was it this mystical, sort of magical process, or were you like, oh, that doesn't make sense, and here's why? Walk us through that.
I think because I wrote the scene where the murderer was unveiled, and I just thought I don't think it's that person, because obviously when I first thought, yes, this is the murderer, I hadn't written very much. So, but then as I was writing, I sort of got to know the character more, and I thought I don't think that motive works. I don't think it's strong enough. And there was somebody else who, again, I started writing, and I was like, oh, okay, actually, I can get why this person may have. So yeah, so I changed it.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. I would have had no idea. No idea, because when you read it, it just seems like, of course. Wow. Oh my gosh, I love the skinny on this. Okay, let's get to some of the other questions submitted in advance. Juju Bean Reads, who is Instagram, would like to know, Louise, how do you gain inspiration for writing a thriller?
Ooh. I guess I always try and write about situations that are interesting to me. And I think like I've always read that sort of old school like Agatha Christie kind of stuff. Patricia Highsmith is another favorite. So that's a sort of suspense element. Um, and I think because I used to be a travel agent before I was a writer, so I've always been kind of attracted
Oh,
to, you know, books that are set in exotic locations or sort of glamorous locations,
ooh.
travel and that kind of thing. So I think sort of putting those elements together. So I sort of came up with the idea for this book, and I was like, it's a book I want to read. So that was sort of the inspiration. I've always felt like I should write books that I want to read rather than trying to just come up with something that I think other people want to read, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So as a travel agent, have you ever been on a big ship like the Queen Mary? What was the research process like into have you sailed on the sea?
No, well, I used to, because obviously I'm in the UK, so France isn't that far away. So when I was a kid, we used to take the overnight ferry to France and then drive and stay on like campsites and stuff. So I used to love the overnight ferry because you'd sort of be like, as a kid, you were allowed to sort of run around, and if the sea was rough, I don't get seasick, but then like me and my brother would just sort of like run around and have fun while our parents were like just sort of lying there trying not to be sick. Um, so I think I've always like boats and sort of that travel element, but also there's always something a bit sort of dodgy about ships because I remember as well, like we'd always be like queuing to get on the ferry, and there were always posters for people that had gone missing at sea. And you're like, did they jump off? Did someone push them? No one ever knows. And so there's always that kind of element that anything can happen at sea. So in terms of like murders, there's no police, they know there's a murder,
Oh,
but like how do you even start investigating something when no one has experience of solving crimes, people are just disappearing, or what what do you do?
wow. I have not taken, I mean, I haven't taken that many boats. I've never been on a really big boat like the Queen Mary. I have taken ferries, and I've never seen any posters for people gone missing at sea. That would be very unnerving. Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing the scoop behind that. Louise, let's get into some of the praise that your book has earned. First up from Nikisa Afia, who came on when her book, Harlem Sunset, was published last year. She says, full of intrigue and tension, Miss Aldridge Regrets is an expertly plotted. We now know you don't plot, so you fooled Nikisa. Beautifully set novel with every character hiding something. Louise Hare builds the story in a way that is compelling and completely unputdownable. Congratulations on that amazing bit of praise. And Nikisa is quite the fashionista herself. She sews these amazing outfits. And so I also sew. And so she and I bonded over that. So she must have really enjoyed the fashion as well. Let's talk about the fact that she noted that every character hiding something, because I noted as I was reading that when everyone is hiding something, it cranks the stakes up. Did that come to you straight away, or were you much like the killer? Were you like, oh, let me give this person a little something to hide? It's not quite enough. What was that process like?
Yeah, I think as I started writing, it was interesting. So some characters who were really only supposed to sort of walk on and say a couple of words and not have very much part, suddenly became interesting for some reason. And I started to think about who they might be and where they might have come from. And yeah, I mean, sort of murder mystery, so everyone kind of needs to be a suspect. So you do have to think, I need to give these people, especially the sort of people around the dinner table. So, it's kind of a small group of people, but everyone at that dinner table needs to have, even a tenuous motive, because otherwise you don't have any suspects.
But yes, that's a good point. So for me, because both of my books have been nonfiction, it's hard for me to imagine thinking the thought of what would this person be hiding, and then having an answer, because my answer would be like, oh my gosh, I have no idea. I don't know what they're hiding. How do you do that? How does it come to you? How do you create that?
The pressure of having to think of something. I mean, I often just think something needs to happen with this character, so I'll write a scene with them in. So, so one of the example would be there's a doctor. He's like a private doctor that's on the ship, who's looking after the sort of rich patriarch of the family that Lena ends up sharing a table with, and he was just supposed to be a small character. But then I was like, well, I have to write a scene with him in, because he needs to have something more about him than just a guy that hands out tablets or pills or whatever. So, so I wrote the scene between him and Lena, and it just turned into something else. Like, I was just sort of writing, and I was thinking, and he started talking about his family, and I was like, oh, okay, interesting. And then I was like, well, what makes this guy leave his family even for money? So where's that come from? So he obviously needs the money. So then you come up with a reason why he needs the money, and then it becomes a bit darker, and then going back. So yeah, so it's just like it's like following a thread, basically. You start off with one thing, and then you're like, oh, so why did that happen, and why does he need that, and what made that person do that one really innocent seeming thing?
Oh, I like that. I also like that you said everyone at the dinner table has to have a motive. And now I feel like I need that on a t-shirt. Like, what a great t-shirt would that be? Hashtag Mystery Monday. Everyone at the dinner table has to have a motive. I can see that on a t-shirt, or maybe a mug, or a tote or something. I love that. And it occurs to me that Leica's question about that she submitted, about what has changed since you published your first book, could also be about, and I don't know what she meant, because she just commented this on my Instagram, but it could also be about pressure, coming out of the gate with most anticipated book, across so many incredibly well-respected publications. Did that feel motivating and supporting to now write book number 2? Or for me, who suffers from anxiety, that would feel crippling and terrifying. Like, oh gosh, how will I possibly pull this off again? What was that like for you, Louise?
Yeah, it can be difficult, I think. What I tried to do was to start writing the next book before people were reading the first one, as much as possible. I mean, I didn't manage to. I don't think I finished the first draft, but yeah, to get as much story so that it doesn't throw you completely off track. Because the next book is like a little bit different in terms of, well, it's not on a ship. There's not, it's a completely different story. There's different things happening to Lena. So like I said, in New York, said in Harlem mostly. So yeah, it's got a different vibe. I think that helped. So I knew that I wasn't writing exactly the same type of book, like the same characters, but it's a continuation. But yeah, it's sort of talking about some different things.
This is book 2.
Yeah.
What year does book 2 take place in?
So it literally starts the same day that the first book finishes. So it's like it takes place in like the next 2 weeks.
Okay. Because that is such a fascinating time in Harlem. I mean, we're talking peak Harlem Renaissance. We're talking Langston Hughes, all these incredible Black thought leaders creating this incredible poetry, music. Jazz music is coming up with the 7 million African Americans who are coming up from up south between 1865 and 1975, bringing, blues music, jazz music. There's this incredibly, exciting jazz cafes, the Cotton Club, just these, amazing musicians. And I mean, what an exciting, enlivening, thrilling time to be alive, to be in Harlem or at the Algonquin Round Table. I mean, wow, that must have been so fun to research as well.
It was really fun. And then, so what I did with this book is basically made life as difficult for myself as possible. Yes. So one of the things that the other sort of mystery side of the next book is, so in the first book, Lena's grieving her father who just died like 9 months earlier. And there's a mystery around him as well, because some things get uncovered that he had kept from her. And so I wanted to explore that in the second book. So part of the second book is basically she's sort of looking, because she knows that she thinks he was from New York. So she's like, well, where do I start looking for him in terms of like his past, and find out, I found out that he kept secrets. Does he have more secrets? Is this it? Like, I just don't know. Do I want to know? And she's going thing. And then part of the story is from his point of view. So going back to before, so like 1908. So, so it was like, okay, I'm going to research 1936 Harlem, but then I've got to research 1908 New York as well. But it was actually a lot of fun, like, because there were just so many such brilliant African-American writers sort of coming through, and people are like a lot more modern than we like to think. Like when you read their work, you're like, this feels like super modern. Like you wouldn't think this was written, at the start of the 20th century. So yeah, it was really interesting.
It is really interesting. And by the way, the name of the book, y'all, I just pulled it from the website, is Harlem After Midnight. That is book 2 in the Canary Club series, the second Lena book. That is out August 29th. You can pre-order at this link here from our favorite woman-owned independent bookstore, Murder by the Book. And yes, this time I really focused on researching the 1920s. So the 1908 was a little before, 1936 a little bit after, but things moved a little more slowly then. There was no internet. And so it's interesting how long, for instance, a song would stay at number 1 because there wasn't a Billboard chart every week. They lingered. But it's so fascinating because I think we think of it as, or some people may think of it as, very long ago, but actually this time was really modern, really fresh. We saw a huge spike up in women's rights, freedom, excitement, sexual, revolution, exuberance. And then it backswung with the Great Depression starting in 1929 and then really into 1930, 31. So it was interesting because it was this huge swing up and then a swing back. And so it was long ago, but there's a lot of similarities. And I think that was one of the most fascinating things that I noticed.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think we'd like to think of history in a certain way, but yeah, I mean, that's why I love reading historical fiction as well as writing it, because you just find all these incredible things out that you assumed, wouldn't have happened, like people's attitudes. I mean, yeah, some people's attitudes are always going to be as we have been told. But yeah, there's lots of very modern people doing all kinds of amazing stuff.
What was the thing that surprised you the most?
I was reading a lot about Nella Larsen, actually, in terms of like the Harlem Renaissance, and because I've always been obsessed with the book Passing as well.
Yeah,
and I was reading about the movie. Yeah, and yeah, I was just reading about her life and her relationship with her husband, which was. I guess let's just call it modern. And she traveled a lot. Like she went to around Europe and things on her own as a woman in like the 1920s. And you think, wow, okay, that's so interesting, because I'm writing this sort of single woman traveling a lot, but and it's always in the back of your mind, like, can she do these things? Like, what can she get away with doing? And I was like, oh, a lot. She can do a lot. So that was like good. Okay, I have my template for who Lena could be in terms of what she's able to do.
Exactly. Oh, thank you for all the likes and hearts on Facebook. This is resonating, Louise. This is resonating. Y'all, book 1 in the Canary Club series, Miss Aldridge Regrets, is out tomorrow here in the US in paperback, and you can pre-order it right now, again, from our favorite woman-owned independent bookstore, Murder by the Book. And the good folks at Murder by the Book will send you Miss Aldridge tomorrow, as soon as she's out, as soon as Miss Aldridge makes her debut tomorrow, they will pop her in the mail for you. So go ahead. I'm going to pop the link up here, and you can grab your copy of Miss Aldridge Regrets. Read that, and then be ready for book number 2 in the Canary Club series, August 29th. That is Harlem After Midnight. So here is Miss Aldridge Regrets in paperback. Click, no matter where you're watching from YouTube or Facebook, click and order her now so that you too can immerse yourself in the world of Lena, jazz clubs, fabulous fashion, traveling by herself on the fabulous Queen Mary. Lots of so many, all the things we're talking about. So you too can immerse yourself. I want to get into just this. The next thing, Library Journal said, with vividly praised your ability to render vividly drawn characters and called your book an exciting blend of murder mystery and historical romance, saying it is hard to put down once one starts reading. Rise Bowen raves fiendishly plotted. You fooled Rise Bowen. It fooled all these people. We now know Louise doesn't plot, with more twists than a corkscrew. This 1930s novel set on board the Queen Mary is a real page turner. She, of course, is the New York Times bestselling author of the Royal Spina series. And we cannot leave out the incredible Fiona Davis, saying, I'm going to pop this one back down because it's covering our faces. In Lena Aldridge, Hare has created a heroine who practically leaps off the page with her sharp wit and incandescence. Oh, what praise. Throw in a jazz age ocean crossing on the Queen Mary in a series of diabolical murders that would make Agatha Christie proud. And I was done for, turning the pages late into the night, calling it irresistible and smart. High praise there from Fiona Davis, the New York Times bestselling author of The Lions of Fifth Avenue. Incredible praise there. Louise, congratulations on all of this wonderful praise that your book has earned, and on creating these characters that are resonating with so many. Is there anything that you wish that I'd asked you, or anything that you'd like to share with us today?
There isn't. I just had so much fun. These were great questions.
Oh my gosh. Well, here once again, y'all, I love me a classic whodunit. I grew up on Nancy Drew, Agatha Christie, like all of us here. I mean, this is Mystery and Thriller Mavens in collaboration with Murder by the Book. We're all here because we love the same thing, murder mysteries. And so I know I love, and so many of us love, historical as well. So here she is, Golden Age. And I just love this gorgeous cover of Lena just up on that stage, incandescent, as Fiona Davis raves, singing her heart out. So Louise, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all for spending your Mystery Monday with us, learning all about Lena, 1936 research, and Louise Hare. Louise, this has been such a joy to host you. I'm so glad a year later I finally got to. I absolutely love this book, and I hope you will come back and join us again.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, everybody, have a great rest of your day, and I will see you tonight at 7 and 8 p.m. with more Mystery Monday. Stay tuned.